Welcome to Real Talk Christian Podcast, where we drink coffee and have real conversations on faith, culture, and society. This is Mark Hyde.
And Chris Fuller.
And on today's episode of Real Talk Christian, we are answering the question, is the church overusing its members? Fuller, you think you got some answers?
Maybe.
Let's find out.
Let's go.
Thank you for joining us at Real Talk Christian, a place where real Christians talk about real issues impacting the community and the world as it pertains to Christians. Now here are your hosts, Mark Hyde and Chris Fuller.
Mark Hyde, how are you this fine evening?
What's up, bro? I'm like caffeinated and twitching and having a good time.
I'm like going crazy. This is like, I think my third cup of coffee of the good stuff.
What is the good stuff, Fuller?
The good stuff
Time to do a sales pitch.
Is the RTC Costa Rican medium light roasted coffee.
Roasted by our very own
Chris Fuller.
Bro, so the last time we drank this, we drank it, typical drip style, whatever.
Yeah, and you made it a little
Your
weak.
boy made it a little weak, but I couldn't make it any stronger. Like, it was...
We could have added less water.
We could have added less water. Yeah, okay, we could have added less water, but
But we
this
made a
time,
French press.
We made a French press, and we didn't just do French press. We, put way too many grounds in there for what it needs to be. But,
my
dude,
heart's pumping.
But here's the deal. That's one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had, bro.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
It's funny that we both took a drink at the same time. So it was like, if you guys heard that awkward silence, that's what it was.
It wasn't awkward to us, bro.
No,
It was
magical.
It's
magical.
magical beans, like Jack and the Beanstalk. RTC magical bean coffees.
All right.
There's no transition out of that, dude.
Yeah,
there's absolutely
it's
no
the golden goose, though, man.
transition out of that, dude. Well, hey, we are talking about a conversation. We're jumping into this probably faster than any other conversation we've ever had.
That's because we're like caffeinated.
We're caffeinated. We've been jamming in music for hours. We've been hanging out. It's late. It's a good time.
Right.
It's a good time. But we're asking the question today, and this was a question that you had, not me. This was one of your questions, wasn't it?
No, this was posed by Paul Lindgren.
Our boy Paul.
Boy Paul's like, hey, man, nobody talks about this. Let's, why don't you guys answer this question for me? I'm like, we'll try.
Let's talk about Paul for a second. He just created a new intro song for us.
Paul is working on a new album.
Mm-hmm.
He actually he's going to release each track as a single.
Okay.
And then eventually he's going to put them all together as a CD, and it's an instrumental CD. And the new intro we have is called Joy.
Yep.
That he wrote for our podcast, which inspired him to make this CD on the fruits of the Spirit.
And so each song is going to be based off of that fruit.
Right. And it's all instrumental, no lyrics. It's just the feeling that he portrays for each of those fruits.
So I'm curious what what some of those are going to be like.
I know.
Like
I'm
when you
excited.
think of like peace, that's probably a standard. A lot of arpeggios and pads but I'm like self-control. What do you do for like self-control?
Ooh.
Is
Mr. Lindgren.
is self-control going to be more like very textbook by the book type orchestral? I don't know, dude. I don't know what he's going to do.
Maybe it's some jazz.
No, see that's more like
Maybe.
I don't know. Patience. He should have a 20-minute long song for Patience.
20-minute long instrumental.
And we know Paul listens to our podcast, so he's listening right now.
Self-control should be all grunge guitar. Just throwing it out there, man. Like,
And then
do. Yeah, but
that's going to be fresh. But either way, we got some new stuff coming out.
Yeah.
John Tibbs gave us some new stuff to release to our listeners, which was super, super cool.
Yeah.
And
I
we're
hope you all
coming out
are
with new
enjoying that.
content all the time. We got stuff coming out new with Dudes and Dads, our first mashup with another podcast next week. So stay tuned for that. So a lot of big things happening in RTC, bro.
Definitely.
And we still got some tricks up our sleeves. We got a few things up our sleeves.
You know your boys got you guys covered.
But hey, so this is back to Paul Lindgren. This was a question. Well, he sends like 20,000 questions, but this was one of the questions.
I think it was like 35 topics
ridiculous.
that he would love to hear.
It was ridiculous.
And we always encourage all of our listeners, hey, if you got a topic that you want to hear about or hear us talk about, send it to us.
And if you want to hear your voice on the podcast, send us a voice memo. Pull up that iPhone, record a voice memo, DM us, Facebook message us, our email.
Right.
You can email it over to us, whatever works for you.
And
that works for me.
We'll just go ahead and plug you right in.
We'll do it, man. And we can hear your wonderful voice on RTC. But so today's question is the church overusing its members?
So, Mark,
I'm
going to pose that question to you.
No, I'm posing it to you.
Hey, in my show notes, it says posted for Mark.
Well, that's because you wrote this one.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit.
All right. Pose your question, bro. Pose your question.
Right. Is the church overusing their members? That's the question I posed to you. That was the question that was posed to me, and now we're here to discuss it. But let's jump into a few little statistics.
Oh, we like
first.
our stats.
Yeah, especially you.
Yep.
But I went ahead and threw some in there for you.
3 wing 2, baby. Let's go.
Right.
Come on, type 8. Give it to me.
Statistically, 20% of the congregation at the average church is doing 80% of the work, while the rest of the congregation is merely spectating. That is from heartsome.edu.
Now, what is heartsome.edu? I mean, obviously, EDU is an educational website.
Right, yeah, it's some college.
It's some random college. I'm pulling them up right now if my internet is working or not. I think it went to bed.
Oh,
there it is. Hartford Seminary. Oh, okay, it's a seminary.
It's Heartsome.
Heartsome.
Yeah, Heartsome. Anyways, yeah, I wrote these show notes like 4 weeks ago, so I don't quite remember.
Oh, don't admit that. But either way, so this seminary who did the research said that the average statistic is 20% of congregational members do the serving, 80
which we've heard. I've heard a lot. I don't know about you.
The 80-20 principle,
Right, exactly. So the question really should be, are the members that are serving burnt out because there are not enough people willing to serve? I think would be the better question rather than is the church overusing the members who are serving.
So you want me to answer that question now, or should we set the stage a little bit more?
Let's set it a little bit more.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that every church is that way. I think at Southside,
but stats are stats. Stats are stats.
Right. I think at Southside we're probably like 50 to 75%, maybe somewhere around in that range, maybe a little lower, but
it's hard. It's hard to put that stat because what's serving? Like what's the definition of serve?
I think they're serving in some way, shape, or form. Even if it's not on a regular basis, serving at VBS, maybe like once a month, once every 6 months. There's some people that are serving every week, and then there's some that just serve on a.
Yeah, I would say Southside, we probably have over an 80% in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Between security, kid ministry, student ministry, worship ministry, tech.
Right.
I mean, the culture's changed a little bit in the since I've been there at Southside, but I know before I came, they were pushing hard. If you're here, your job is to serve. This is not a country club. This is a church. Like, we're supposed to serve each other.
Right.
But yeah, so I would say Southside, we're definitely probably closer to that flip where I would say probably 80% of the members serve in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Depends on what your definition of serve is.
Well, yeah, how often you serve or whatever.
Right,
but,
correct.
So, I mean, outside of Southside, let's talk about the 20-80 rule. So why do you think 20% actually get involved and serve? I mean, what's kind of your thoughts on this? A lot of this is just conversation.
Yeah. Honest opinion.
Thoughts. Yeah.
People are lazy. So I'll talk it from a Southside perspective. Okay. This is an area that Pastor Scott and Laura, his wife, are probably masters at. They're master recruiters. Now we're still working in, okay, once we recruit, how do we continually pour into them? We're working on that right now. But Scott and Laura, they legitimately are the best recruiters I have ever seen. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is our churches has so many people serving is because they do a personal one-on-one ask for everything. Okay. And it's not just hey, if you're willing, it's like, hey, we need someone here. Have you thought about serving here? No? Well, you should. Let me know what your thoughts are next week. Like, bam, no questions asked. VBS, most people are asked one-on-one. And we've actually have seen, and this is actually a kind of a fact, it's a different mindset. Maybe we're going too deep too quick, but it's a different mindset in cultures. Like, there's the older generation, and I'll call it like it is. They think an altar call is not an altar. Yeah, they think an altar call is good enough. An altar call is good enough to someone to follow Jesus. So an altar call is good enough for you to get a church announcement out.
Right.
So I've had so many old people say, hey, we need help with this. Can you announce from the pulpit? My answer is no, because I already have other things that are announced, and people don't listen to announcements. And
hey, I listen to them.
do you, though?
Yes, I do.
Oh, because most people don't. That's why. But if you watch, I only really give 1 or 2 announcements per week.
I mean, very rarely you'll do like 4, but it's on a rare occasion.
Very rare, because you remember the first one, you're kind of in about the second one, the third one. I won't just say no to the senior saints. Normally at the end, it'll be like, oh, and just remember, we have Wana and youth group Sunday night, senior lunch is this coming. Like, I just go boom, 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 boom. See you later, which is it's in the bulletin.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the personal ask is what makes people want to serve. Just saying it from the pulpit, asking people to just, hey, serve, or Facebook post, hey, we're looking for people to serve. Most people won't do that. Now, so why I think that there's a big 20/80 principle is the fact of, people are scared to make the ask, which I am. I'm very scared to make the ask. But at the same time, we get content. Like, we have the same people doing the same thing, so we don't need to develop and grow those leaders. Like, I think of one person in particular at our church. She leads like 2 or 3 different ministry teams.
Right.
But she is wise enough to know, okay, I can't be the sole director. So even though she's the head, she's like, all right, this person is in charge of the... this person's actually running senior lunch, even though she's the contact person. This person is running our, they call them hostesses, but they're really not. It's more like if we need food or set up for food or all these different things for different events like Easter breakfast or pastors' dinners or things like that, she coordinates that well. She's also the head of our first impressions team, our greeters team. So she oversees 3 huge teams, but she is a wonderful delegator. But I actually check in with her every single month to make sure, are you okay? Are you overstressed? Is this too much? How can I help? All these different things. But at the end of the day, I think 20% of the people are the ones who serve is because those are the ones that see the value in serving, and churches are just content with those people doing all the work because they're consistent and they're faithful. A sin of mine is I'm too prideful to ask for help.
Gotcha.
And the reason is because I know I get the job done, and I know it's done correctly according to my own standard. And if it fails, who else is there to blame but me?
Right.
Whereas if I have other people leading other ministries, and all of a sudden they mess up or they do it wrong, and then it comes back and it's like, oh, why didn't this happen? It comes back and it hurts me. It hurts my reputation. It hurts my persona.
Right.
It hurts my leadership skills because I trusted these people and they failed me.
Right.
So I don't want to deal with that. So I'll just do it myself. So a lot of times, if we know this specific person will serve in all areas, we just let them do it because we know that they have the same mindset where they're going to do it and do it right. That's my 2 cents.
All right. I'm ready to rebuttal.
All right.
No, not rebuttal. Just give you my 2 cents. I'm going to think broader outside of Southside.
Yeah, no, dude. And Southside's my context, so that's where I serve. That's where I get paid. I'm a pastor.
That's your world.
It's my world. It's where I live. You know. Go ahead.
All right. So my 2 cents is it's twofold. Why there's 2 sides of the coin. So 20% of the people serve, and 80% of the people don't serve in majority of churches, according to the statistics. The reason why 80% of the people don't serve is actually multiple reasons, I believe. Yes, I believe that there is some laziness, but I also believe in busyness of life.
That's true.
Not that it's oh, I'm gonna go get my nails done over serving. It's more of like my wife. I've got 3 kids under 3 that she takes care of. So when does she have time to serve?
Right, and so I think it'd be good in a little bit talk about the age groups because those are different. I'm more talking about the those who are like empty nesters and things like that.
Yeah,
I mean lazy.
Yep. I'm getting into that.
Yeah,
so,
go ahead. Keep going.
So the other,
my bad.
So the other flip side that I have to that is that I believe when leadership finds people that are willing to serve because they've had so many not serving, I believe they rely and ask more things of the people that are the yes type people, that I will continue to do it because I want to serve. I want to be faithful to God. I know we're called to serve. And so I'm going to do whatever is asked of me to the best of my ability as far as like time-wise, job-wise, stuff like that. I think of Paul Lindgren. Paul Lindgren is a guy that will say yes. If he can do it and make it work with his schedule and his family's schedule, he will say yes. So he serves as a musician and, practices and every single week. I mean, he's not paid staff.
No.
But he puts in the time like paid staff on top of his job, on top of his family.
He's a dad. He's a husband. Yeah.
Right. So for him, he gets burned out. He gets a lot of irons in the fire, as I like to say. And I think that happens a lot, and not on purpose. I don't think leadership is doing it on purpose. I think that, and you may be able to speak to this because you're a leader and an elder in the church, but I think a lot of the times it's because you've asked so many people and only 20% are saying yes. So those 20% of the people will say yes. So you're going to ask them and ask them and ask and ask them, and you're not even going to worry about the other 80% because you've been told no so many times.
Right.
So, and I think that's the two sides of that coin. There's it's partly, I don't want to say laziness, but contentness.
On the comfort level
on the leadership side, and it's the same on the congregation side. It's both sides are doing the same thing. They're a little bit lazy, may have busyness of life, comfort level. I think comfort level on both sides. And I don't want to
say, I will say laziness was kind of more of a joke, but
it's
at the
true.
same time, I'm more thinking of those people where, there's a couple people at a different church I was at, not the one, not Southside, but other, because I've been on staff at one other church as an intern, and there were a lot of people there, and it's like, okay, so you don't have any kids, you're still able-bodied, but you don't do anything.
Yes.
Like I'm talking like mid-50s, late 50s. It's like, why don't you want to serve? I mean, you have time, you just don't want to do it.
Not everybody is gifted in the way that the church building needs them to be gifted.
Okay.
So I don't think, and again, some of it's the comfort level.
Okay. And we can talk about that from a church staff standpoint. And I know like we're kind of like fumbling over this part right now.
Well, it's trying to formulate and kind of give both sides the story.
Right.
On, I think,
because looking at it, I think in one sense, a lot of people don't serve, I would say, because the leadership is failing. Mm-hmm. But then on the other side, in terms of, okay, like this is a shortcoming I have as a leader. So I was at a church who did overuse their members.
Right.
In fact, me as a volunteer, I was asked to operate as if I was a part-time staff.
Right.
And I like Paul, and for me, I'm not one to say no, and I like that. I'm okay with that. But at the same time, I didn't have any kids. It was just me and my wife, and it was no kids, no dogs, no nothing, and so we could do it.
Right.
But other families that had kids, it was like, man, that's hard. So for me as a leader, I am so worried about burnout, and I'm so worried about inconveniencing people that I actually have a low ask.
Right.
I have a low committal ask, which isn't always good. It's more like, hey, if you want to help, that'd be cool, but you don't really have to. It's all right. But if you do, that's awesome. Like, great. But then on the other side, so that's not my fault.
Right.
But the other part, I think, is the fact of pastors are so, and let's just say pastors, staff members, whatever term you want to use, we're so busy on focusing on doing the ministry that we don't get to think about the ministry. So, for example, this is one area that I've been working on is how do we make visitors acclimated quickly in terms of how do we get people to go from guests to friends and friends to family? Mm-hmm. That's been kind of what I've been charged to figure out. And one of the issues I've been having is I've been so busy doing all these different things that I don't get to step back and look, okay, how can a volunteer run this? What areas do I need help with? Where can I pass this off? And then more than just that, a lot of pastors like to just say, oh, you want to be a Sunday school teacher here? Cool, sweet. Here's some curriculum, go have fun.
Right.
Rather than how can we constantly continue to train and develop and have conversations and have follow-ups and make you a better leader. So yes, you might not feel equipped and qualified to do such, but I can get you to that point to be able to train you where you're confident in actually doing such.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I'll give you an example. Janelle and I were at a previous church before Southside, and the worship leader was not paid staff. He had another job, but he was full-time worship leader.
Which we had for a couple of years at Southside with Randy.
Right. So they, he took a lot on his plate, but every year they made him take a certain amount of time. I think it was like 6 weeks or 8 weeks that he had to take off in a row. Like they made him take it off because they didn't want him to get burned out, right? So they're concerned about him. They're not just passing, hey, I've started this ministry, I'm going to pass it off to a volunteer, and now it's that volunteer's responsibility. They still had ownership over it and made sure to keep checking in with the volunteer, whereas I feel at a lot of churches, and I'm not saying Southside, but a lot of churches that I've visited, it's like, Sunday school teacher, here's your curriculum, it's you.
Go get it.
I expect you to continue to run this for years to come. And it's like, whoa, maybe people only want to do it for a couple months or maybe a couple weeks or whatever, just fill in from time to time. Right. And so I think that's where there's a disconnect, and that's, I believe, why some members and volunteers get burned out. And I think that's why some members of the congregation are scared to get involved.
Okay. So it's someone's perspective of, if I do this, I may be stuck doing this forever.
Yeah.
Rather than giving hey, you're signing up for 6 months, you're signing up for a year, you're signing up for a quarter or anything like that.
Or you're signing up for every other week, for a couple months.
And I'll say this, like, we have a very, very, this is the problem with our church right now, is we have so many people serving in our children's ministry that we tried to start a junior church. Someone tried to start that on their own. This is going to sound bad. We kind of called it, where they were doing it on their own and they wanted to do it their way, but they got burnt out in like 8 months.
Right.
And some of that is they didn't find other people to help them. They didn't ask them to come along and come along for the ride. Something that I have found very beneficial, this is not necessarily, I've seen this in the children's department, let's put it that way, is if you can equip volunteers to go recruit other volunteers, that is always the best way to do it. Right. So rather than the pastor asking every single person, if, for example, you're on the worship team, you meet a musician, he's like, dude, you need to come serve with me. Or our nursery people do this, our toddler people, where it's like the other toddler workers are the ones trying to find more people to come serve with them.
Right.
I've been trying to do that with the AV team, where it's like, look, if you don't want to be on here every other week, go find me somebody.
But and also on the flip side, I mean, if you have only certain people doing it and they are getting burned out, is that ministry portion of it necessary? Like, it's children's ministry. Is it necessary? No, I don't. I mean, my personal opinion, no. I mean, they can sit in church with their parents. Is, a worship team, is that necessary? No, you got voices. You can do sing just guitar. Old school. Yeah, or just do it old school style, just voices if you didn't have anybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's certain aspects of the Sunday gathering that if there's no volunteers, then hey, the best thing to do is shut it down, because then you're going to get volunteers.
Right. So I think we need to make sure we say this. Now, in your opinion, if you're a part of a church, should you volunteer in some way, shape, or form?
I believe if God leads you that way, yes.
Okay.
And what I mean by lead is you're gifted in an area, and you feel that you could help.
And obviously, there's stages of life where you have to take that into account. Like, let's be honest, Janelle has now 3 kids under 3.
I've stepped away. I mean, I was helping with Sunday school. I was on the worship team, and I've stepped away from all that because my wife needs help. I mean, that's just the way it is. And it was like, well, do I choose to serve in this way, or do I choose to serve in our podcast? And I believe that I can be a better service in our podcast ministry that we have here. That could be more effective, and it doesn't require as much time as what those other things did. When I was helping with Sunday school, because you're the youth pastor, but, you're studying all week, you're preparing a lesson all week for that week. And then, I was doing that and on the worship team, so I had Thursday night practice, I had to be there first thing Sunday morning. And
then, Janelle had to get the kids to church by herself, or you had to go home and help.
Right. So, yeah, it can be a lot, and it can be overwhelming, plus working a full-time job, and crazy hours. And so for me and my family, we made the choice that that the podcast ministry is what we're going to do, Real Talk Christian, and that I was going to step away from everything else for this time and season. So, but, I mean, as my kids grow, obviously I will get back involved, because I know I have gifts, and I have a heart to serve. But I don't believe everybody has that heart to serve in the church, that they may be serving outside the church in ways that the church doesn't even know.
Right, and that's what my thought just that just crossed my radar right now. Because if you think about what the church is people. The church is not a building.
Right.
And now, thankfully, we also have a pastor who has said from the pulpit for years, God did not give us this property so you could go mow the grass.
Right.
And so that way we could have a pretty looking building. Like that's sure, yeah, you're serving on the maintenance team for the physical building. We appreciate that. We need that. Thank you. But that's not what it's all about. We're about bringing people, bringing the kingdom of God to people by telling them and what can we do to serve in those realities and take care of one another.
And you have to remember, you have to keep your priorities straight.
Right.
First, one and only, you serve God. That's number one priority. Number two, if you're married, you serve your spouse. Number three, you serve your family. And then number four, you serve your church and others.
So do you think there's ever a time where it's okay for those to come out of, those to go out of that order, where God first, let's keep God first. But there's some times where serving, because let's be honest, if you're serving, that requires some sort of a sacrifice, whether it's time or money or, weekends or whatever. But is there ever a time where, for this season, serving the church has to trump family?
No.
No?
I totally disagree with that. And the reason being is we're supposed to, I'll start with the husband-wife relationship first. You're supposed to love your spouse. The husbands love your wives as Christ loves the church. So would you say it's okay you want Christ to reprioritize loving the church? If we're comparing to that, no, Christ always loves the church. He serves the church. We serve him. He serves the church. He came as a servant. So we are called to serve our wives first. That's who we are one with. That's the union right there.
Because he who loves himself.
Number two,
loves his wife,
we're called to train up our children in the ways of the Lord, right?
Yep.
So that's got to be our next priority. So that's our family. And when I mean family, I mean in your immediate household, extended family. Okay, I think that falls in the realm of brothers and sisters in the church. That's who you serve. So that's the number four.
Gotcha. So do you think it's more so the fact of, I love how this was, a lot of these questions were posed to me, but I'm flipping them. Do you think the fact that the American church maybe has gotten church wrong and that's required a lot of serving in other ways?
Give me some examples.
Okay, so I think about it this way. The American church, Christendom, Western Christianity, we have buildings that need to be taken care of.
Right.
We have worship services that need to be performed.
Right.
We have, and because of technology, we have to have other people serving in those ways.
Right.
We have children's ministry for all those. And now that, I believe, is because we've even talked about that for our own small group, where it's okay, do we have one family or person per week take the kids and do a special little thing with the kids while the others have small group time? And then student ministry as well. Honestly, I'll be the youth pastor who says student ministry is not from the Bible. The Bible doesn't talk about student ministry. It talks about older teaching the younger. That's what it talks about.
Student ministry. That's what we call it nowadays.
That's what we call it. But
isn't it funny? Just to pose this real fast. I realize you're the youth pastor. I'm not undermining you by talking about your age, but isn't it funny that the person who's teaching the young is only 10 years or a little more older than them, but the people that have life experience or retired don't seem to have a whole lot of interest in helping train up the Gen Z generation.
So you ready for this? So I'm a part of 3 different student ministry Facebook groups. I think the biggest one might have 12,000 youth pastors in it right now. The youth ministries that are killing it are the ones with the baby boomers as their leaders.
Right.
I will never forget this picture. This was years ago. Fortnite was huge, right?
Right.
This small group leader who was in the student ministry, he was in his 60s, maybe early 70s, and he was a junior high boy small group leader, and that's all they did. So you know what he did? He went out and bought a system to start playing Fortnite, and the kids were teaching him how to play. Because he's like, if I need to invest in these kids, I need to get in their world and be able to be there.
He was becoming a Roman to win a Roman.
Right. But at the end of the day, he was the older teaching the younger with all these experiences. And, for me, I look at it and I ask this question now. I was hired at 21 to be the youth pastor.
Pretty young.
I look back, and that's what churches always do, is they hired the youngest guy ever. And now I look at it, for me at 28, I finally have a kid who's 4.5 and another one who's 14 months. So now I can relate to parents the fact of like, look, I'm trying to raise my kid, but I have some age and some experience where I'm not making stupid decisions all the time in terms of seeing the future. But
you're in the same spot I am. We're young enough that we can't really connect with the baby boomers as far as raising teenagers.
Right, no.
And we're
old
enough.
Don't even have teenagers now. Gen X.
Well, yeah. And then we're old enough to where we've been so far removed from high school that it's hard for us to really understand what they're going through as high schoolers.
I'm basically Gen Z, so I'm
Yeah, but you're not going through the same things they're going through on a daily
basis.
Heavens
no, and I admit that.
And the school system is different now than it was 10, 15 years ago.
100%.
And so we may know with knowledge from what people tell us what it's like, but we have not experienced it, and so it's a different realm.
Right.
But anyways, that's a big tangent.
But I'm going to segue back into it using the tangent.
Okay,
so
ahead.
The youth pastor is kind of the liaison between the students and the parents. Like that's kind of one of the goals. My job is to minister to the teens, but my job is also to help the parents understand this generation, how they can best. I don't know what it's like to raise a teenager because I don't have one.
Right.
And I'm not going to be the first to be bold enough to say, oh, here's how you raised, like, here's why your teenager resulted in this and this. I don't know what it's like to raise a teenager.
Right.
I know what it's like to raise a toddler.
Right.
And starting to raise, a preschooler and a kindergartner. Like, I'm getting there. But I can help parents understand, like, hey, look, these are the stuff your teen is dealing with. I might not be able to tell you how to parent, but I can give you resources and my connections that do it. But this is why, for me as a leader, I need to make sure that I have older generations coming and serving the teenagers.
Yeah.
Now, this is where I get very nervous, though, in all honesty, is like I've had some senior saints who have said, oh, I want to come down and talk to the teenage girls about modesty. I'm like, well, with that lead, that's a no. Because you don't want to get to know my teens. You just want to preach at my teens.
Right.
And teens don't do well with preaching. They want a relationship first.
So I heard what you just said about how you're the kind of liaison between the teens and their parents.
I'm trying to be, yeah.
I get that, but that shouldn't. It is your role, but it shouldn't be your role, because parents should be serving and teaching their children to a way that they have that relationship and they can talk about those types of things. And I'm not trying to tell people how to raise their kids.
But the teens won't. Like, they won't talk to their parents. It's mom and dad,
I get it. I get because why would I want to get in trouble, or why would I can't divulge this stuff, but there needs to be communication there between the parents and the teens, and the older generation should be helping you help them. You know what I mean? It's a trickle down effect. That's the people in their 60s, 70s should be teaching people in their 50s. People in their 50s should be teaching people in their 30s, and so on and so forth.
It's that one-on-one discipleship,
right? Exactly.
That we're trying to go through,
which we don't have anymore.
Right. No, and that's something we're talking about and we're working on.
There's a huge disconnect between Gen X, baby boomers. Well, baby boomers, Gen X, I think they get along pretty well. But between Gen X and millennials, it's very, very scarce.
Yeah, anytime there's a 2 or 3 generation gap, there's a big disconnect. And I heard a really good lecture on that, where instead of going, okay, boomer, a boomer's goal should be, or a millennial should be going, okay, boomer, like, yeah, like, that's cool. Let's figure this out together. It was a fun. Yes, exactly. That's why we work well together. But no, at the end of the day, though, and speaking of Southside and serving, and is the church overusing its members, I feel like our church actually is missing a generation too.
Right.
We're missing the empty nesters. We don't have a lot of empty nesters.
Right.
We have some senior saints who are in their 70s and 80s.
I like that, senior saints.
Senior saints. That's a nice way to put it. But they're not always super involved.
Right.
There's some that are, but a lot that aren't. But we're missing a big gap that loves to serve and get involved and do all these different things. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so we, we've kind of got off on a tangent. I'm gonna try to bring us.
Yeah, let's bring it back.
Bring it back around. Since we're talking about the differences in generations, who should be serving? Should it be the younger people, the young family, the older family, the no kid crowd that serve? I mean, who do you think should really be serving?
Everyone. But in all honesty, my big answer is the biggest servers in the church should be the empty nesters. I know it's a weird thought, and this is the reason why. being a young family, it's hard, man. Like it's hard to
it
have
is.
kids,
Yep.
and no, that's not an. I mean, because but you know, you still served in Awana. Janelle always seemed to be having a baby right around Awana, so that doesn't help. But you know, our small group, everyone in our small group serves in at least 2 different areas. It seems like, whether security or grounds or even teaching, small group leaders for youth group, toddlers, children ministry, babies, whatever. They all serve in various realms. But because of those time commitments, it's very hard. And then I got parents who are, a lot of my leaders at youth group are parents, and they flat out said, I can't be exactly what I feel like I need to be because my own kid has games every single night, and then there's family, and there's all these different things. But then there's that gap of, I think of my mom, who's empty nester, mid-50s. Like, my mom just wants to serve, man.
Right.
Like, that's all this lady wants to do. And but she's also a servant, like she's a Martha. She ain't no Mary. She ain't got time for Marys. Like, if someone's got to stir the chili, she's going to do it. Like, that's my mom.
She's a Martha.
Exactly. Like, I'm just like my mom. Yeah. But we don't have a lot of that generation at our church, and I feel like that's a generation that has the ability to do such and has the time and not just the time, but the wisdom to be able to do that and to pour into others, you know?
But most people, not that I'm trying to call people
go
old,
ahead.
but most people that are empty nesters, they don't have the same stamina as people that are younger. Right? Because, I mean, they go to work all day, and most people, you know, I think of Jan Pfeiffer.
Yep.
And she works some crazy long hours.
She does, and that lady has the biggest
and
heart in the world for
she is serving
ever. Her
like
and Conley
crazy.
both,
I
man.
know. And you can just see some nights how wore out she is. And it's like, her heart is wonderful, and I love her to death. But
she gets tired, man.
Heck yeah. But then I look at somebody like Jagger, and not to call you out, Jagger. Sorry,
what's up,
buddy.
Jag?
But Jagger's always full of energy. Like, he's got, and that's just because of
he doesn't need caffeine.
That's just because of the age. I mean, when you're younger, you have more energy. When you're older, you start slowing down. Your body starts wearing down, and that's just the way it is. So I get what you're saying. But I can see the other call for, hey, maybe younger people. Hey, you know, that's what I could see the conversation being like the older people going, the younger people should serve because, you know, that they have more energy. They have this. I've got my job. It wears me out. And then I can see the younger people, like what you were just saying. Well, they're empty nesters. They don't have all this stuff going on. They don't have games. They don't have small families. They don't have. So I can see both sides of it. My opinion is, if you're able to serve. If you're able and you have the heart, serve.
So let me ask you this
way,
then,
shape, or form.
Because let's talk. You know, staff member, clergy to church member. Like that's our relationship right now.
Oh boy,
what can us church leaders do to help protect our people from burning out?
Whatever you want, Pastor. Oh. No.
Can you tithe a little bit more, specifically to line 515? Just put 515 in all your tithing checks. That's my
instead of 10%, we're going to go ahead and raise the taxes here to 25,
and make the rest go to 515.
Right.
Line 515. That's my line. That's my youth budget.
Anyways, I'm sorry, I was. Being
but what can we do as pastors to make sure, let's take a two-sided coin, to make sure that you as a volunteer does not get burnt out, but also what expectations should we have on a church member?
I think the biggest thing that paid staff should remember is that it's not we're not getting paid. Like, we have to go to another job. So if we're unable to serve, or if we're exhausted and need a break, or such things like that, be understanding. Mm-hmm. And you guys are pretty good at it. I'm just speaking in generalities here. I know in previous churches, of friends that I've talked to or churches I've gone to, paid staff seems to forget that. They think, hey, I got all this time and I gotta do this on this night, but you gotta remember it's part of your job and you're getting paid to do that. Whereas
a lot of times I can move my schedule around where if I'm gonna be at church till midnight, I don't have to go in the morning.
Right. And where, a lot of most church members have a paid job that they have to go to, and then they're going just to volunteer. So it's like working two jobs, rather than. And so I think a lot of pastors, at least what I've seen in the past, tend to forget those, and I don't think it's on purpose. It's one of those things that kind of like, oh, it slips my mind. Like, hey, I'm doing this and this night, and I need help and volunteers. And so that's one thing. I think another thing is leadership needs to realize if you don't have enough volunteers to sustain it without people getting burned out,
don't do it.
Look at it as is it really worth it?
Which that's why we don't have children's church over first grade.
Right.
We tried twice, and it causes disappointment when parents are like, oh, well, why don't you have this anymore? Well, why don't you step up and serve?
Right. Yeah. And that's what if I was the leader and somebody said, well, we want this, be like, get the volunteers and you take over because that'll be you.
And that's where it's hard as a leader because, oh, man, Scott's really good. We've had people step up to volunteer to do certain things, and we're like, we don't know if that's the right role for you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's rude to say, but it's more of, I won't go into that.
Yeah.
Because that's very specific.
Right.
But that's the question of at what point, like I think worship, we got 6 people on stage usually.
Right.
If it's a good weekend, we got 6 people on stage. We got 2 people in the sound booth, someone on, or in the AV booth, another person on the floor with the soundboard itself. You know, all of a sudden we got up to 10 people leading worship. When how many do we actually need?
Right.
Maybe 2, one for singing and playing, and the other person to make sure it's just turned on. Or even Soshay could turn it on if he wanted to by himself.
But is it, you know, it's one of those things of, hey, do you have the volunteers? Right now we have people willing to do.
Right, so let's go for it.
So go for it, but then realize that people might get tired and need a break, and you guys have
to be prepared and have those conversations.
Right, and have backup plans for that. And I mean, obviously we're blessed enough to have a worship pastor. A lot of churches don't even have a paid staff member to do worship, so they have you guys.
Let alone have a full-time paid pastor.
Right,
like we have 3.
Right, so just realize that you can praise the Lord without instruments and without microphones and sound systems. You can
children's church.
They did it before.
Yep.
Yeah, it can all happen again. Now, if God's blessed you to be able to have those things, great. You know, if you have musicians, utilize them, especially if they're willing to serve. I would say don't pressure. The one thing that bugs me the most about a church is if you make me feel guilty for not serving. Like, that's the one thing that makes me like, well, I'm not serving now if you're going to try to do the guilt trip on me. Like, I despise it. If you're going to try to guilt trip me and be like, you need to serve because God says you need to serve, and if you don't serve, you might want to look at.
There are some churches where they renew membership every year, and they have to have, like, if people aren't, you know, like attending regularly, giving regularly, serving regularly, it's like, nope, try again.
But where is membership in the Bible?
It's not.
Exactly. So to me, if a church is going to do that, I'm just going to go find another church.
No, I will say we don't do that.
No, we don't. No,
we don't do that.
Requirements for membership at our church is regularly kind of attend,
right,
be baptized, and be a Christian.
and
I mean, there's other things.
So here's
too,
where I'm wrestling with things. You know, it's the fact of, and I feel a little guilty for this, but my job as a pastor, according to Ephesians 4, is to equip the saints to do the ministry.
Right.
So, in your opinion, how can I equip the saints for ministry to help them do the work? Because it's not my job to do the work of the ministry. My job is to equip the saints to do the ministry. That's my job as a pastor.
That's the purpose of Sunday gatherings. We've had this conversation before, is to equip the saints, right?
Right.
So, your question was, how do you equip?
How do I equip with?
How did Paul equip? How did Peter equip? Did they preach from the pulpit, go out and serve, or did they teach the gospel of Christ and teach others how to teach the gospel of Christ and send them out?
I think both. Definitely both. There was definitely sermons in the Bible, but at the end of the day, they were.
It was a different culture though too, because they didn't have this big elaborate building that had to be maintained. They didn't have all these other things. It
was let's be honest. It's a lot of the church started as grassroots.
Right,
a bunch of people getting together to worship.
Again, we've already said that the church is not a building; it's the people.
Right.
So,
but we see, Paul sending Titus and sending Timothy to these churches to lead these churches. So there was obviously a person who was the head, the leader of these specific churches in these specific areas.
You know what Paul did? You know what Peter did? They made disciples, just like Christ did. And as Christ sent out his disciples, they sent out their disciples, and that's the way it's supposed to work. as a teacher, as a pastor, supposed to come alongside and make disciples, and then send them out. And then those disciples are supposed to make disciples and send them out. And it's supposed to. That's how it's supposed to grow.
And I get that, and that's a hard place for me, dude. Being vulnerable here as a pastor,
right,
is some of it's my superhero complex or my savior complex. The fact of when I was hired at Southside, my title was the youth minister.
Right,
I was supposed to minister to the youth. I've always hated youth minister. I've always hated that title. But instead of, I like the title of the director of student ministry or something like that. But at the end of the day, I was, this is nothing wrong with Southside. I think this is how the modern church has done it, is the fact of the professional staff of the youth pastor is the one who's supposed to lead the teenagers. Not, I'm the leader of leaders, who my small group leaders and other leaders are the ones who are really ministering to the teens.
Right.
So should I be a pastor to just my small group leaders, and then the small group leaders oversee each little various grouping of teens? And then just like Jesus, Jesus had his 12 disciples, his 3 closest, and then they all went out there and did that. So I guess one question is, what is the work of the ministry,
Yeah. I'm going to give you my opinion. It doesn't clearly spell it out word for word we're in such a different culture. Back then...
Dude, it's not even the same, dude.
Yeah, you didn't even have it. So I can give you my opinion on it from what I see.
And thanks for joining, RTC. We'll see. No, I'm kidding. Go for it, bro.
My opinion is that you should take, or any pastor should take, 6 to 12 people under their wings and pour into them. Obviously, you're still doing the Sunday service. That's just part of
the gig.
That's part of the Western culture. That it just is.
Well, I would even say early church culture too, but
somewhat. But you take, just like Paul took Titus. He took them under, or Philip, or they took these people under their wings and taught them everything that they know, right? There was no, back then there was no seminary school.
No.
There was none of that. And I'll just...
Their seminary was better because Paul went and studied under, Barnabas and then he was with Peter for 3 years or whatever.
To me, that's how it should be. The role of pastor was not how much schooling you had and the title you got. It was you learned from a teacher, and then that teacher said, I've taught you everything that I can teach you. Now I'm sending you out.
Dude, we see, the problem with you and me is we have so many conversations off script too. It's kind of, I can't remember if we did this in a podcast or if it was other places, but it's the idea of the master and the apprentice.
Right.
And this, I won't say it was a podcast because you talk about a union worker, how you have to study under the master for a while, and then after it's like, okay, you're still considered an apprentice, but it's time for you to launch out and start figuring things out on your own. Then once you become the tradesman, now you have someone who's an understudy.
Yeah, and it's constantly that training that goes on. So that's what I think that the responsibility should be. That's you're equipping the saints right there. You are teaching a select few. Christ gave sermons, like the Sermon on the Mount.
Yep.
But then he had a select few he poured into and taught them everything that he could in that time that their little puny brains could handle from God teaching. But and then the apostles, went out and took certain people under their wing and poured into them the teachings of Christ, and then sent them out. And that's how the church obviously got started, and that's how I think we should continue it today. It's like, I think I've mentioned this in a podcast before, or maybe just a conversation we've had. My godfather gave me this analogy once. He said, you have a bowl of porridge, right?
Okay.
Your bowl of porridge can't feed 100 people, but it can feed 2, right?
Right, of course.
So wouldn't it be better to fill up 2 people than to leave 100 people starving?
Yeah, until you have parents writing you angry letters because you didn't choose their 2 kids.
Well, that's a different, yeah.
And not 2.
Right.
No, I meant 2 because you meant 2 for porridge.
Right. No, I get what you're saying, but it's
there's a mindset
thing about
of do for a few that you wish you could do for all.
The thing about the Western culture, right, is that we like to send if we're going back to the kids, we like to send our youth or our kids off to somebody else to be taught.
Right.
When that instruction should come at home. Train up the ways in your children of God that they may. How does it go?
Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he gets old, he shall not walk away from it.
There you go. Thank you. You're like.
And if you want to know more about raising your kids to be Christians, check out Cross like the cross of Jesus, cross-formed kids with Ryan Coatney. There's a link in every single show note. The cross-formed kids with Ryan Coatney, and we got to have him on the podcast soon too.
Right.
But no, keep going. So we like to send our people off to the professionals for their teaching.
Right. It's just like, yeah. I mean, we go to church. We need the professional. Well, where's your personal study? Where's your pouring into each other? Where's this relationship thing where we walk through life together, where iron sharpens iron? Last week's podcast, we started off, with the scientific stuff. We started off on one note, and as we're going through the podcast,
as we're reading the Bible, it's like crap. Well, I guess
nope,
I'm wrong.
We both started off on a wrong path in the middle of the podcast.
Let's fix it.
We came to a good conclusion together. I mean, by
reading the scripture, not listening to someone speak.
Right, exactly. Bible is the most important thing. I don't care what anybody else says, because anybody else will do interpretation and may twist things or get things wrong. Your job is to study the Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
That's your job.
Let's start to land this plane a little bit. I'm going to ask you one more question.
Wait, how did this get to me having all the questions asked to me? I was supposed to be asking you.
Because I'm a youth pastor. It's my job to take a teenager's thought and spin it on its head. And instead of asking me a question, I ask you a question. It's called the Jesus method. So, or the Socratic method. But so here's the final question I want to ask. So we've had a lot of...
Yeah, I hope we're answering...
Tonight was it was a conversation. Like, this was not a how-to. This was let's just talk about this and reason a little bit together.
Let's flesh it out.
But let's say that somebody, they're serving in church. They're one of the big-time servers, right? Like, this is not something that the pastor put on them. Right. This is something they put on themselves. Because some people do that.
Right.
When you start to feel burnt out as a volunteer, as a servant, as a church member, what do you think someone should do?
I think, I mean, I know.
And then I'll give you my opinions as a pastor.
I know what I did. Like when
you were feeling burnt out?
Well, not burnt out, but when I had to step back from stuff.
Right.
And that was talk to leadership and tell them I needed a break for a while. I mean,
I just call it what it is.
Yeah, most leadership knows that, hey, if you explain things to them, they're going to be sad.
Oh, we're always very sad, but we get it.
But yeah, they're understanding. At least in my experience, they've always been pretty understanding. The biggest thing is when you're burned out, not continuing to push yourself and talking and being honest about it. Because if you're serving with the wrong heart, there's no point in serving.
Right. And
if you're serving disgruntledly, but you're doing it because it's an obligation.
And you could be filling a hole that someone else could fill, but you're just hogging the hole.
Well, and you could be straining your faith. You could be
hating leadership,
harboring bad feelings. It's better to go talk to leadership
before you even get burnt.
Right. If you're starting to feel burnout, just go talk to your leadership. Say, hey, I'm feeling burnout. I need a break. And I'll let you know when I can come back.
And I'll say this about you, and this goes back to, you ready? This goes back to the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs. We didn't talk about the DISC personality, and I felt bad about that. But love languages, whatever.
8-wing 5.
There it is. But see, since you're self-aware,
right,
you can sense, okay, I feel like I'm about to enter into a new season where it's starting to get a little heavy, because you have not pulled out of serving. In fact, we're called to serve God. And you doing this podcast maybe isn't benefiting the church in terms of the physical south side, but our job is to serve God, and we're serving God in this way. But you're very self-aware. I think it would be very helpful for some people to be a little bit more self-aware of, I think back at the last church I was at. There was one person in particular who they were known for jumping in so fast, and then once they jump in, they go, oh, crap, this is too much. I'm out.
Right.
And it would be like they would jump in. And what was funny was us staff members knew it.
Right.
So when they jumped in, we were already working on, okay, what's going to happen when this happens?
Right.
And then it happened, and we did the plan, and you never thought we missed a beat.
Right.
That's because we were prepared for that person to do that. So I think in one sense, it's helpful to be self-aware if you know you go too fast. If you're like me and I'm a yes man, where I say yes to everything because it's just it is what it is. You know what I mean? But so I think A, you need to be self-aware. B, you have to know when you do serve, it is going to require some sacrifice. Because even with this podcast, it's I mean, you could be home with Janelle right now,
right?
And you're not.
I'd probably be in bed with
I
her
got
right
my
now.
cuddle buddy, Janelle. What's up? Actually, dude, I ain't going to bed for forever tonight because I've had way too much caffeine.
I know. I'm like wide awake now. I'm like, okay.
Time to go read your Bible, people. I got a lot of catching up to do in my Bible reading. Goodness. But for me as a church leader, I would much rather you as a church member, like, hey, look, here's the deal. I like the way you did it. You said, hey, this is coming up. I'm going to finish out the month,
right?
And then I have to bow
I said
out.
it a month ahead of time.
That's exactly what you
right.
did. You walked up to Soche and like, look, here's the deal. We're about to have kid number 3. We're doing the podcast. We're busy. I will go to the end of the month, and here's what you said. I don't know if you remember this. You said, we'll revisit this at January 1 of 2020.
Right.
So I didn't revisit because I don't lead worship.
But I haven't.
You revisited it, and you were like, nope, for the betterment of my family, I cannot do this.
Right, at this time.
And but you revisited it.
Right.
And so for me as a church leader, I would much rather have a leader come to me like, look, I feel I don't want to be like, you're asking too much of me, but it's like, look, I feel like I've jumped in a little too far.
Right.
Let me bow out in 2 weeks.
Right.
Almost like
give you some time.
Give me some
leadership,
time.
right?
Because there's nothing that put it this way, this can sound really harsh. If you jump in and bail, I'm going to stop trusting you, and
right.
I'm not going to ask you to serve anymore because I can't trust you.
Well, I think
my youth leadership,
totally
I trust you guys a lot.
I totally agree with you. I want you hit on a very good point there. You know, I'm very self-aware.
You're very self-aware,
and my mind always thinks that like, hey, everybody's self-aware of being burned out, and they're not. So I want to give a quick couple of key things to look at. If you're serving right now, okay, and your relationship with God is struggling, or your relationship with your spouse is struggling, or your relationship with your immediate family is suffering, okay, or if you're in agony or tired, or then you probably are getting burned out. Go talk to your leadership. Say, hey, be honest with them. I can give you a certain amount of time, and then I need to take a step back. Don't just get to the point where you burned out to where you quit, because then you'll quit serving, period. And that's not where you want to be. Talk to your leadership. I know our leadership at Southside is really good and was really understanding. Last year I did quite a bit of stuff between VBS and teaching Sunday school, and
every year your hair's different on VBS.
I keep people guessing. Kids never know who they're like. Who's this new guy,
dude? I won't sidetrack. There's a story that when you threw me off mid announcements one time, but keep going.
Yeah. So, I would recommend taking inventory of where your relationship with God is at, and if you feel it wavering or you feel yourself wavering, talk to leadership.
Yeah, definitely. I want to give one resource out real quick. Not give it out because I ain't got that kind of money. But if you are a member at Southside, I do have these readily available for our church members. But there's a book out there from Tom Rayner. He was the former president of Lifeway Resources. Now he's on his own. He's retired. He's one of those dudes who was like 60s, who was like, I took Lifeway as far as I can. It's time for a younger, newer leader to come in. I'm like, dude, this guy's the GOAT. Mm-hmm. Greatest of all time.
Thank you.
But he wrote a book called I Am a Church Member, Discovering the Attitude That Makes the Difference. And that is a phenomenal read that I think every church person needs to read, because it talks about how we're not a country club. The church isn't here to serve you. You were put into this church to serve others. So figure out how you can serve others and serve the body. And Fuller, even though you're not leading worship anymore, even though you're not teaching Sunday school, you're not involved in children's ministry, you serve in other capacities. Like, let's be honest, the podcast is one of those. But I would also say that you still mentor a lot of my teens and young adults while you're doing that. I think of Jagger, I think of Nathaniel, I think of Eli and these other people. But even more than that, if there's a family out there who is the first to jump up to make a meal, it's the Fullers. If there's someone who needs help, it's the Fullers. If I ever have a night where I know I'm like, dude, I am not okay, I can call you up and I can crash on your couch.
Yep.
Like that's where you and Janelle are at right now. Right. I mean, dude, we've even had small groups at your house. I'll just say, I spent Thanksgiving with your family, bro, and almost Christmas.
By the way, we love that.
That was legit.
It was awesome.
Like I almost meant Christmas with your family, because that's the type of people you are. You guys have the gift of hospitality, and you guys do it. there's so many different ways to serve the church,
and serving doesn't always necessarily mean in the church building,
in the nursery on Sunday morning.
It doesn't. I mean, there's other ways you can serve the church, and the church doesn't have to be, for us, Southside. The church can be Christians outside. It could be giving funds to missionaries. It could be all sorts of ways you can serve. God doesn't say, well, because you're a member at Southside, you can only serve at Southside.
Right.
You can, if you don't feel comfortable or if you don't have any gifts that Southside needs at the moment, I am sure there is somewhere somebody needs your gift.
And the biggest gift, I don't even say this, the biggest call that we have is we're called to be disciples who make disciples. So if you're looking at your life going, dude, I don't know where on earth to serve, go find a disciple, bro.
Find one person to pour into.
Start pouring into them. I think that's a good place to end it, man. So if you have any more conversations or questions you want to bring up, whether me as a pastor or Fuller as Fuller. Sorry, I had to, bro. But feel free to DM us, message us. Do you know what DM means, Fuller?
Direct message.
Nice. It's social media.
Man.
So you can DM us, you can message us, email us, do whatever you got to do. But we want to keep this conversation going. So feel free to reach out to us in any way that you can. But we can't end the podcast yet because we still have a fun fact with Fuller. And I chose not to read this one.
What?
All I know is that there's a lobster involved for fun facts with Fuller.
We've pulled up to the train station. Now we're getting
I looked down and read lobster and went, nope, I don't even want to read this. I want Fuller to tell me. So I'm going to learn and be educated in the same way.
I'm going to learn you something right here.
You're going to learn?
What?
We've been listening to way too much country music. Oh, not country music, but twangy music.
Twangy music, yep. All right.
Give it to me, bro.
Fun facts today. Lobsters communicate with their bladders.
What? No way.
Lobsters have bladders on either side of their heads, so they communicate by urinating at each other. If they want another lobster to know that they're happy or sad or angry or interested in a relationship, they say it with pee.
I'm just picturing.
Hey.
Dude, all I picture is little kids where it's like, oh my God.
Wow.
I can't even. That's just
yeah,
awkward.
So, next time I say hello, I'm just going to pee on
No. Next time you are not going to pee on me. You're going to. Don't even shake my hand. I don't even trust that anymore, dude. Don't even hug me. Just stay away. Stay 10 feet away from me. I'm gonna go Purell myself. Man. That's nasty.
Go bathe in it.
So, moral of the story is if a lobster pees on you,
they're saying hello.
They're saying hello, or they're saying, please don't cook me.
Right.
One of the two. There's no transition.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll just end it there.
Well, hey, if you guys who have stayed with us till the end, we love you more than all the other people. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time.
Take it easy.
Thank you for listening to Real Talk Christian. To help get our podcast into the ears of other people who need to hear these conversations, we would love for you to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. To keep the conversations going, feel free to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and share our content with others. See you next time.